Welcome in. I'm so excited to be sharing this recipe with you. Lovely thing to share with all of your loved ones this time of year. But before we get started, one of the things that we do in our chef program is just taking a few grounding breaths. This allows us to become present in the moment, to really appreciate the space that we're in so that we can appreciate the cooking that we're about to do. So if it feels good for you, feel free to close your eyes. If you have any tension anywhere, you can give your shoulders a roll. Roll your neck a little, and then just start focusing inward on that breath. Taking some nice deep breaths in, really filling up your belly. And on the exhale, just pressing everything out. And with every cycle of breath, just really setting the intention of being present in this moment, knowing you're exactly where you need to be in this place of community and safety and curiosity. And take one more big deep breath at your own pace. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come on back. Wonderful. Well, it's just a really nice moment, giving yourself that presence of mind, being in the kitchen, right? Because we deal with a lot of dangerous implements. We're dealing with hot stoves, sharp knives. So just being really present while you're cooking is one of the things that we like to focus on. So today, though, it's all about chocolate and dates. So for Valentine's Day, we want to have a celebratory dessert, right? Whether that's chocolate covered strawberries or something fun. But I wanted to share this date cake recipe because the food pun is just too good to pass up, right? Save the date. Valentine's Day dates, all of that. So the first thing that we're going to do when we make our cakes is to prepare our pan. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a foolproof method to make sure that your cakes come out perfectly of your pans every single time. So I have here just a little 6-inch spring form. You can also use a straight edged type of pie pan or cake pan, something that has a solid bottom, but I happen to have the spring form here, which is great. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to create a really nice bottom layer. So I have parchment paper here, and what I'm going to do is fold it up. So I'm going to start by folding it in half, and then I'm going to get into my arts and crafts and kind of fold it into the shape of a paper airplane. We want to keep that sort of middle section as our point, because that is going to help us, again, find the middle section of this pan. So I'm going to fold it over and kind of keep folding it until I get to this nice thin triangular shape. Okay, so maybe one more, trying to keep that nice center point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line that up with the center of my pan. From here, I can take my kitchen shears and just trim kind of in that angle, that rounded edge of my cake pan. And that allows me to get this beautiful little cake round, which is going to go slightly up the sides and then also completely cover the bottom of my pan. But we also want to protect the edges of our cake too. That's often where sometimes things stick. So what I'm going to do for that is I have a larger piece of parchment here. And what I'm going to do is fold it in half lengthwise. Make a nice little crease with your fingers. And then from here, you can either use your kitchen shears, or I actually like to use just a nice sharp knife. And we're going to go ahead and just cut that right in half. Okay. All right, so from here, what we're going to do is actually cut little strips at the bottom. This is going to allow sort of an overlapping effect. So about an inch or so apart and about an inch or so long. We're going to just go down the length of our sheet. And also, just in case we need a little bit more to get around the circumference of our pan, we're going to do the second piece as well. Okay. So again, about an inch apart. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we're just trying to get a consistent sort of fringe on the bottom of our paper. All right, so set that off to the side, get our pan, and from here we're just gonna add a little bit of oil to coat it. You could use butter if you're okay with dairy, but this cake is dairy-free. So using something like a vegetable oil like avocado oil or olive oil or coconut oil is a really great thing to keep that sort of non-stick ability of your pan. But here it's actually also gonna help us hold on to our parchment paper as we're setting it in the pan. Okay. So we have our long sheets with that cute little fringe. And what we're going to do is kind of curl it and set it into our cake pans. And you can see it's kind of overlapping because we have those nice little slits cut into it. We're creating this overlapping effect so it fits perfectly in the bottom of our pan. So you can see here, I just have a little bit extra that is not filled in. So instead of using the entire sheet, I'm going to use my kitchen shears just to cut what I need to make sure I'm getting that full coverage around the edge of my pan. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and set it in there, again, getting that nice little overlapping effect. And then from here, we have our edges covered. We have that little bit overlapping in the bottom. And then we're going to put that nice little circular parchment round right in the bottom, pressing it out to the edges. And then that way you have full coverage. So there's no pan showing in the center. So there's no chance for anything to stick to it. All right, so we set up our pan. We're going to set that off to the side and get in on making our beautiful chocolate date cake batter. So what's really easy and great about this cake is that it's all in the blender. You don't have to do excessive creaming or mixing. It's not a big arm workout like some cakes are. The blender is going to do the work for you. So I'm going to get my high-powered blender. You could also use a food processor as long as it's nice and robust so it gets you that really smooth texture. And from here, we're going to add in our ingredients. One thing I'll note is that using your wet ingredients first, things like the eggs, the dates, the vanilla extract, is going to make it so that that dry ingredient doesn't stick to the bottom of your blender. So I'm going to go ahead and crack my eggs. And pro tip, when you're cracking your eggs, do it on a flat surface. So instead of cracking it on the edge of the bowl where you can potentially get eggshells and things into your mixture, crack it on a flat surface, either the bottom of your bowl or on the counter, and then go ahead and crack it into that bowl. That way we have that nice clean egg without any of the shell. All right, so we're going to do that on the rest of our eggs. Get all of them into our bowl. Leave that all for our compost, and then we can put our wet ingredients in first. So I'm going to get these into the bottom of my blender, get all of that good egg material, which is going to be beautiful, healthy fats. It's going to add very nice richness and also really good protein to your cake. We're going to add our vanilla extract. And then the other sort of wet ingredient that we have are the dates. So the feature of this beautiful cake, and it uses quite a bit of them. It's about 2 cups of dates that I have reconstituted in warm water for about 30 minutes or so. You can usually get away with 10 to 20, but the longer you do it, the softer they're going to be and the more easily they'll blend. You can see here they're pitted dates and the beautiful medjool dates, but they're going to add lovely caramel flavor to this cake. And they're actually one of the largest portioned ingredients in it. So we have flavor, that lovely caramel sweetness, and that's the only sugar that we're adding to this. We also have great fiber from our dates, and then also some nutrients and minerals like potassium and magnesium. So I'm going to go ahead and pick them out of the liquid, but I'm not going to toss the liquid because I may end up needing to use a little bit of it just to make my batter nice and smooth. So I'm going to set this off to the side, but not get rid of it. All right, from here we can add in some of our other ingredients. So I have some orange zest. It's about the zest of 1 whole orange, a couple teaspoons of baking powder, which are going to give us that nice lift and aeration in our cake. I have some Himalayan pink sea salt, which is going to bring beautiful flavor. And then finally, I've got cinnamon and cardamom. These are great for antioxidant benefits. Also, they're just delicious. But I will say with this cake, if you don't like any of these flavoring ingredients like the orange, the cardamom, or the cinnamon, you can actually just do the base recipe that is a caramelly, really rich chocolate cake without those. But I really like the little brightness that the orange zest gives and that nice sort of spicy quality of the other spices. All right, so we're going to dump those in, get all of that good stuff into the blender. And then the final ingredient for the cake batter itself is raw cacao. You can absolutely use just standard cocoa powder if you'd like, but I really like using the cacao for the antioxidant benefits. You'll still get a lot of that from cocoa powder as well, but I also really like the flavor of a raw cacao too. So you're going to go ahead and put that in. And we're going to start blending. And we're not going to add any extra liquid to begin with, and then we'll add it as needed to see if we need to add that little bit of looseness to our batter. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Vitamix going. And we're going to blend until it's nice and smooth. And you can see here that the batter has kind of stopped moving. That means it's so thick that the vortex effect is not able to get it spinning. So I'm going to just add a little bit of liquid just so that I can get those last couple chunks of dates to loosen and blend up. So maybe a couple tablespoons, start small, and then you can always adjust. It's always easier to add than subtract in cooking. All right, so we can see it's gotten a little bit looser, but we want just a little bit more. We want a little bit of movement in our batter. That's going to create a really nice moist cake. There we go. Excellent. All right, so let's take a look at that with the spatula now. Gonna just kind of stir it around, make sure that I've gotten all of the big chunks of dates out. And it's okay if there are some little pieces of texture because they'll honestly just taste like little caramel bits in the middle of your cake. But you can see how nice and sort of flowing that batter is. It's kind of what we call a drop batter. It wants to drop off your spoon and still has a little bit of movement and texture. Beautiful. So we're right on the money for our texture here. So what we're going to do now is put it into our prepared pan. So we have our lovely prepared pan, parchment paper lined so it's not going to stick. Because again, like I said, the only kind of fat that we're getting in this cake is from the eggs. There isn't any oil, there isn't really anything that's going to help it from releasing from your cake pan. So super good idea to prepare your pan ahead of time. All right, we're going to go ahead and use our spatula. And this does just one single 6-inch cake layer. So perfect for sharing size. And I will admit, it's a pretty dense cake. So you can have a few different slices of it over a day or two, even if it's just for yourself. All right, so getting all of that good chocolatey batter. And the smell of that cardamom is lovely. That little bit of orange really brights it up. We just have really nice balance here. So it's not just chocolate, but we have some depth of flavor there. All right, scrape off any little drips of chocolate. Okay. And then before we put it into our preheated oven, which is set at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, we're going to give it a few rough taps on the counter. This is going to help the cake batter settle into the corners. It's also going to remove any big air bubbles that can cause sort of a change in structure in your cake. So a few strong taps, kind of allowing that surface to smooth out a little bit. Right? Beautiful. And so then from here, we can go ahead and put it in our preheated oven. And it takes about 30 to 40 minutes to cook, sometimes a little bit more depending on the moisture level, sometimes a little bit less. So, what I always do is set a timer for half the time the recipe calls for, especially in baking, because sometimes our ovens are unbalanced, right? They're going to be heating at different temperatures. So, it's always a good idea to check it about halfway through baking so you can rotate your pan, you can adjust the heat, you can just keep an eye on what you're cooking. Okay, so we'll set a timer for about 15 minutes and then check it, see if how much time it needs, and then add an additional timer on. And while it is baking, we're going to make our frosting. So I will say this is a really quick and easy entire cake. All you need for the frosting is just some almond butter. You can also use things like cashew butter. Sunflower butter works really well too if you have somebody who has a nut allergy. We're going to use a little vanilla for flavor, some salt. And one thing to note, I'm using unsalted almond butter. So I am going to add the salt. If, however, you use salted almond butter or other nut butters, you can leave this out and add salt to adjust that balance. Okay. We also have a little bit more raw cacao here and then maple syrup. So the maple syrup is going to be the only sweetening that we have here. And so I say in the recipe, start with about a quarter cup, but have a little bit extra on hand because some people may want a little bit more if you want it to be sweeter. And then the last thing that I have is just a little bit of plant-based milk. I'm using almond milk because I'm using almond butter, but this is just in case you need to thin out your frosting. If it's a little too thick, just add a little bit at a time to get the texture you want. So we're gonna go ahead, put our almond butter in, and I like a nice creamy almond butter for this. I think a crunchy could be nice if you wanted that texture, but the creamy is gonna give you a really beautiful, smooth frosting. Okay, we're gonna add in the salt. We're gonna add in our vanilla extract, our raw cacao powder, and then we're gonna start with about half of the maple syrup. Again, that's starting at about a quarter cup. Okay, so we'll do half of that and see where that gets us on sweetness. And we're just gonna whisk it up until it's nice and smooth. So the maple syrup is a really wonderful ingredient. It's a beautiful way to add sweetness and also add some trace minerals. The almond butter is going to give you some nice healthy fats, some good quality protein. And you can see how quickly it comes together. This really nice fudgy thick frosting that's going to coat our cake beautifully. And now I'm going to just give it a quick taste. So grab a spoon, grab a tasting implement. I'm just going to add, just see what I need to add. I'll show my face when I'm tasting it. Oh, it's so good. That little bit of salt really brings all those flavors together. I will say this is a different brand of almond butter than I normally use, and it's not quite as sweet as previous ones. So I'm going to add in just a little bit more maple syrup just to get it more kind of where I want it for that sweetness. All right, so a little drizzle of maple syrup. And then also I'm going to add just a touch of almond milk because I want this to be a little bit looser, a little bit more easy to spread. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, incorporate whatever kind of plant-based milk you like. You can also use just plain water as well. That you can see, I'm going to go ahead and in a second, I'm going to use my spatula to get all of the almond butter that is nicely stuck in my whisk. So we're just going to get all of that into the bowl. Excellent. And then mix again, just to see where we're at for texture. Beautiful. Much better, much more spreadable. Just a nice, rich, fudgy frosting. All right. So I did a little bit of movie magic. Last night I made another cake, so now I've got two sitting in my kitchen. Lucky me. But this is what your cake is going to look like when it comes out. It's really nice and chocolatey, rich. Also, a lot of beautiful moisture from the dates and the eggs that you're adding. So we're going to add on our frosting. And I really like this frosting. It's got a nice savory element to it from the salt, from the almond butter. And this usually is enough to fully coat all sides of this 6-inch cake. If, however, you don't have quite as much of a sweet tooth, you can just cover the top. And then I always like to save that little bit of extra for something else, like to go into a crepe or for another treat. So we're just going to smooth the top a little bit. And then here comes the fun and colorful part. One of the great things about this cake is that it's extremely versatile. Chocolate goes with so many ingredients. So whether you are a citrus person that you put some of that citrus zest in there, great. I have some Cara oranges, some regular navel oranges. I have fresh berries because who doesn't love chocolate and strawberries together around Valentine's Day? Also some raspberries. And then I like having the contrast of something like a mint leaf because that's going to add sort of a different color element. So it'll make those colors really pop on your cake. So let's go ahead. We'll do a nice twist on our oranges. I like the height that that provides. So to do that, all you're going to do is cut a slit up to the center of your orange and then spin it in opposite directions. Then you can center that right in the middle of your cake. Okay, kind of bend it, press it into your frosting, and then we can go ahead and load it up with all of this beautiful fruit. One of the things that we always talk about in plating is odd numbers are a little bit more pleasing to the eye. So I've got 3 strawberries, I've got 1 slice of orange, and I've got, let's say, 7 raspberries. And then we can put in just a couple mint leaves, again, to give you some color contrast. I also love putting some toasted coconut on here if I want to add in just like a little bit of a white, or you can even toast it a little harder and then you can get elements of light brown. And try to find a cute little double mint leaf. And then just add in more fruit on top because it's all about bounty, right? And the fruit is a great way to add additional fiber, additional nutrients, lovely antioxidants. But there you have it, our chocolate date cake. Easy, quick. And I will say, I obviously did the movie magic. So, with your cake, when it comes out of the oven, you want to make sure you cool it completely. If you add that frosting in when it's still warm, it may kind of flow down the sides of your cake, which is okay if that's what you're going for. But allowing it to cool completely will get you a much more sort of structural top that you can then put all of your fruit on. Right? There you go. I hope you have
Wow.
fun making this recipe.